Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Game Industry Insight, a look behind the scenes at game development. And be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future video topics. Alright everybody, for today's Industry Insight, we're going to be talking about the topic of devaluation in the game industry. And I know that this is a topic that's as exciting as a no-hit Soulsborne run, but it's one that is very important, and all the more so as we are still in deep with the Steam 2017 summer sale. Now, when it comes to valuing video games and trying to put a price on them, as we've said, that is very difficult to do. And the consumer entitlement when it comes to lowering a game's price or having massive sales is very much up for debate. And depending upon where you fall on this, really comes down to whether you work in the game industry or you're a consumer. Now, when we talked about sales and such before, the game industry has really grown thanks to the fact of having more of these sales and allowing games or gamers to spread out their money. As we've said, in the old days, you were spending $60+ on a game and that's it. Maybe in a year or 2 years from then, you would get a $10 or 10% off. But when games were priced this high, it meant you could only really spend on a few select titles. If, let's say, for instance, you have money set aside or money for luxuries at $300, and you're spending $50 per game, that's 6 games a month and not a penny more. So the cheaper games get, the more you can spend, and the more that money gets spread around to various companies instead of to a select few. But with that said, as we were about to talk about, there's the negative of that. The cheaper games are, not only does it kind of grow the consumer's acceptance or expectance of these games dropping in price, but it makes it harder for developers to earn a profit, much less break even. And this is very dangerous in a market where everybody is putting out games on a daily basis. And when people are expecting these kinds of massive sales or these massive price deductions almost immediately. Now, when it comes to devaluing video games, like I've said, what makes this very hard to talk about is that there really aren't any set knowns or set qualifiers for what is or what isn't a part of game value. Like we've talked about, I have games around here, which I was looking around for an example, which I don't have. There are games that I have played for hundreds of hours and maybe spent $20, $30 on. And then I've had games that I've spent full $60 price on and maybe got 5 hours out of them. And the problem when it comes to this is how different other markets are. When we look at any other product-driven industry, there are usually 2 qualifiers that determine value: scarcity and quality. If I have like a mint condition Shelby Cobra from I think like the 50s or 60s, I have a multi-million-dollar car right there. If I have a barely drivable Yugo, then I don't have much money there. But when it comes to video games, this is where things get very tricky. And this also really leads back into that discussion of product versus art and where you feel games fall on that line. Now, I know for those of you watching this right now, especially my hardcore followers, you will probably land more on the art side than products. But for the vast majority of consumers, they see video games much like cell phones or cars. The second you take it out of the box or you drive it off the lot, the value countdown begins to drop. And many people feel that video games deserve to lose their value within within years, months, and sometimes even days. Like we've used the example of Doom 2016. Despite it being a Game of the Year winner, many people, including yours truly, talked about how great it was. It dropped 50% within 6 months. And that is for a AAA game. And the AAA market is very interesting in this regard, As we've said, AAA developers and publishers are very brand focused. That means not only creating a game or a series that people want to keep playing, but then growing that with more and more titles in it. And that is one of the major points of devaluation. For instance, when we look at stuff like Call of Duty, Madden, Battlefield, and any other major series or franchise built on sequels, whenever the new game comes out, chances are the older one will lose its value. Why should someone play Call of Duty Infinite Warfare 1 when they can play 2 or whatever the one we're up to right now? Why should someone go back to Madden 2015 instead of playing Madden 2016? Speaking of which, as we all know, in about 2 months from now, Madden 2017 will be out. Or, I'm actually not sure, is it 2017 or 2018? Again, you're talking to someone who barely follows sports here. But the point is, the older games in these franchises tend to lose their value. And it stands to reason for a lot of people that surely games from like AA and indie spaces, why should they retain their value? Why should you keep your game at $20? Why can't you lower it down to 10 or 5? And as we said earlier, or in the previous industry insight, when it comes to sales, people have become entitled to having these massive sales. And chances are, and you can pretty much look this up for yourself, if a game is not on sale during the Steam 2017 sale, check their community forum page, and I will bet that there will be at least one thread from someone saying, "Why isn't your game on sale? Are you greedy? Why can't I have your game for 40% off?" and stuff like that. And this kind of entitlement is very dangerous because quality cannot be done on the cheap. When we look at some of the best games released, everything from like Doom 2016, World of Warcraft, My Favorite Game Renowned Explorers, these are titles that you don't just hash out within 2 months, sell it, and you become millionaires. These are games that can take months and in many cases years to develop. Now, when we talked about feature creep and games getting into that very crazy development cycles, that is a different story. We're talking about a game that is so unique or so different that it just takes time to create. Again, games like BioShock or Stalker or anything like that is not something that is done easily. And someone has to fit the bill for that, be it the developers putting more and more money into the process, or the consumers who have to buy the game at a higher than normal price, or higher than normal price compared to other games around that market. As we talk about stuff like Gone Home, I think retailing for like $22, Dear Esther around the same way, Stanley Parable, and so on. But as we said at the start of this piece, how do you put a price on a video game, and how does it retain its value? Now, in the indie space, this is even more troubling, because as we've said, many indie developers view their games as one and done. As in, I am going to put every idea that I have into this title, and that's it. I'm not turning this into a 5-series franchise with options for a movie or a TV show. I'm putting everything into this game. People like it, there may be some DLC, but there will not be 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations of this. And because of that, many independent games, especially those who are the Game of the Year or the bests of in their respective categories, tend to be one-offs. Something like the Talos principle is not so easily copied compared to something like Candy Crush Saga or Angry Birds. And when we talk about games like that and the whole issue of cloning and stealing other game ideas like that, the easier the game is, or the simpler it is, the easier it becomes to clone it. Again, something like Angry Birds or Farmville, it's very easy to make something like that. But it's a different story to create the next BioShock or the next StarCraft. Again, you pick a high-name title and we could probably talk about it here. And this is where things get very interesting with games holding that value. As we've seen over the years, there are many games that have gone on sale, all the more so as we're talking right now. But there are still games that have retained their value or have fought against devaluation for the longest time. And this presents a very interesting case in terms, again, of trying to put a price tag or put a value on them. Some really good examples, of course, would be from Nintendo. Yes, we've seen other 3D platformer games, action-adventure titles, and fighting games, but there are only a handful of Mario, Zelda, and Smash Bros. Games. And with Nintendo in particular, if you find a Nintendo game for $20 or less, that's not a bargain. That's you digging for gold and also finding and striking oil at the same time. They just don't go on sale that often. And the same goes for a lot of Blizzard's titles. Although we have been seeing some push on that front with sales in recent years. But again, when it comes to some of these bigger name franchises or bigger name companies, their games can tend to hold their value because the brand itself essentially becomes equity. With World of Warcraft, for instance, there are a lot of MMOs out there, as we've talked about. But how many MMOs have had the years worth of development, content support, and a growing fan base that World of Warcraft has? We could argue the original EverQuest, but in terms of popular culture, it's basically World of Warcraft or nothing. And that is how they have managed to keep that subscription rate going. Because who else is really competing with WoW? The same goes for Nintendo titles. Like I just said, there are plenty of action-adventure games and open-world titles released. But there is only one Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And this kind of value that they get put on there, it's one of the rarer things. Now, when we're talking about games holding their value, one major point, and that's actually come up in argument over the last few days, has been Paradox Software. Paradox, of course, are the makers of the very, very grand strategy games Europa Universalis, Stellaris, Crusader Kings, and the like. And they have really just created not only just a niche, but almost a sole monopoly of that genre. Like we've said, there are other games in the grand strategy side of things, but there is only one Crusader Kings 2 or Europa Universalis and so on. And the war game genre, as well as grand strategy, have kept their value for a very long time. Because these are games that you're not playing them for 2-3 hours. These are games where you can dedicate months, even years, to keep playing and finding more out there. And Paradox knows this. While they've had some sales, their games notoriously do not go on or get a price reduction. And they really make up their value with their games as a service model. And there's been some arguments about them putting out too much DLC, which for games like this, for this particular side, I do side with the developer. Because like we said, Paradox doesn't just put out a game and it's done. They put out a game and they will support it for years. And that extra time adds up to more money being put into it. And their DLC, again, it ranges from simple things like more art portraits to expansions add in brand new systems. But when it comes to that monopoly, it does stand to reason that how long should games like this retain their value? And the big argument that was made a few days ago was regarding them actually raising the price on their game to, I guess, adjust for inflation or for other markets. And that doesn't, like we said, when it comes to the game industry, a lot of consumers feel entitled to have games as cheaply as possible. And nothing gets those people more upset than seeing a game go up instead of down. Even for double or triple the effect when you're doing it during one of the biggest sales periods in the game industry. And this is, again, one of those parts where, depending upon your own position, you may feel strongly one way or the other. And I don't really know what to say. Again, they put out a statement saying this was to combat inflation or different price values or current economic values around the world. Now, if that's true, I can give them some reasonable credit for it. But the argument stands that when you're talking about a game that's 2-3 years old at this point, how long should a game retain its value? And that's the question we're going to end today's industry insight on. For those of you watching this, whether you are a developer or consumer, how long do you feel a game should preserve its value? Should a game that's 10 years old still be at full price? And whether that full price is $20, $60, $5, should it retain their value after 5 years, 1 year, 2 months? Again, depending upon who you talk to, the race to the bottom can be seen as a boon to consumers, but it can also be seen as the downfall for a lot of video games. Because as we said, quality takes time and money. And if people want to keep seeing these Game of the Year award winners and these titles that are really pushing the industry forward, then they have to be expected to pay a little bit more. Unless they just want to see nothing but Candy Crush, Farmville, and Clash of Clans. But that is a topic for another day. So thank you so much for watching today's Industry Insight. If you enjoyed the piece, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back for daily discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. And like I said, let me know what you think about game devaluation. And for any indie developers watching this, like I've said in previous videos, I'm curious about how you came up with the price for your game. Whether you charged $1 or $30. What was the rationale or qualifiers that you used when you were determining your price? Let me know in the comments below because I am very interested. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you all next time. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.